Okay, so we finished chapter 1, which was telling the people, hey, stop using excuses. Stop saying, oh, it's hard, and not serving God. When God tells you to do something, get up and do it. And God says, all this, what you quote unquote bad luck things that were happening, this was me getting your attention. You need to get up and do the work. So by the end of chapter 1, they actually had gotten to work. They had started rebuilding the temple, and God says, fear not, I'm with you. So now we're going to fast forward to over a month later. So we get to Haggai chapter 2, verse 1. It says, in the 7th month, in the 21st day of the month, came the word of the Lord by the prophet Haggai, saying, speak now to Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest, and to the residue of the people, saying, who is left among you that saw this house in her first glory? And how do you see it now? Is it not in your eyes in comparison of it as nothing? So God's pointing out, hey, how do you think this house compares to Solomon's temple? How does Zerubbabel's temple compare to Solomon's? So 31 days later, God wants them to know. Now, this is getting close now, depending on the calendars. It may even be near the time of the Feast of Tabernacles, right? So all of this stuff, God wants to tell these people that the glory of all that you're doing, it kind of is no good compared to the previous temple, right? You guys remember when Solomon was going to build the temple, David had stockpiled tons of gold and silver and brass and all this cedars and all these things. And then when Solomon became king, he had imported tons more, literally working with infinite resources, as well as being this master architect. He made something that, in my opinion, if it was still standing, likely would have been one of the 7 wonders of the world. I mean, extremely ornate, right? And whenever he says, compare that one to this one, well, the people, we learned from Ezra, right? The people looked at it and they started crying because this one was so pathetic in comparison. I mean, that's disappointing, right? So why? Why was it so pathetic? Well, one, the resources weren't unlimited. 2, it was probably they started to rush with the work because all the money that they had been given, they had spent 15 years doing who knows what with it, right? Their resources aren't there, and they had just started. So it didn't seem that good. And it sounds like this is a very discouraging conversation. It's like, wait a minute, why is God trying to discourage these people? Well, actually, no, he's not trying to discourage them, right? He's trying to tell them that when it comes to the glory of God, man's opinion doesn't matter. What you think is glorious and what actually is glorious doesn't matter. Look what he says in verse 4. He says, yet now be strong, O Zerubbabel, saith the Lord, and be strong, O Joshua, son of Josedek, the high priest, and be strong, all you people of the land, saith the Lord, and work. And here he says it again, for I am with you, saith the Lord of hosts, according to the word that I covenanted with you when you came out of Egypt. So my spirit remaineth among you, fear ye not. So this was a pretty unexpected statement, right? When he said, look at the comparisons, does this even matter? But God, he tells his followers, be strong. How can you be strong? How are you telling me to be strong when you said everything I just did looks like junk compared to the previous? How do you want me to feel strong after that? Would you feel strong if I said, let me see your homework? Wow, that looks nothing as good as your sister's. I'm proud of you. Oh, sure, thanks, right? But no, he's saying, no, be strong. It's okay that this temple doesn't meet your expectations. It's okay that it's not what you expected it to be. Don't be discouraged because it seems inadequate. Be strong in your weakness. In weakness, God is strong. He makes you strong in your weakness, right? You ever heard the phrase, you are my strength when I am weak? You can't, if you think you're strong, then you're not strong, right? When you think you're healthy, you don't need a doctor. When you think you're rich, you don't need a loan. It's only when you're poor do you need someone to rescue you. When you're ill, do you need someone to heal you, right? And God says, I am strong. He's like, be strong, I'm with you. He did not forget their covenant. What was their covenant? Well, all throughout the history of Israel, would you say it's a series of successes or more likely a series of mistakes and bounce backs, right? It's just been mistake after mistake after mistake, falling away. And God, he says, don't forget, I keep my promises. When I said you as a nation belong to me, you still belong to me. I don't back out of the deals I make. You know, we all hit periods in our lives where we feel pretty inadequate, where we feel like, man, I'm not doing anything for God. Man, I'm really of no value to anyone. This is nothing but trouble. But God says, be strong. I'm with you. Seasons of our life change. We change. God does not change. He's the same yesterday. He's the same today. And he is the same forever. Right? Yes, sir.
Abraham, as they went through the wilderness, they would mess up. God says, I'm doing this because of the covenant I make with your father.
He always reminds them why. And he doesn't forget. And he doesn't forsake us when we fail. He's not more with us when we're living righteous and less with us when we're not. We may be more with him. There's a difference. Yeah, it's not dependent on me and you. Absolutely. So he lifts them up and he strengthens them. Verse 6 and 7, what does it say? It says, for thus saith the Lord of hosts, yet once in a little while, I will shake the heavens and the earth and the sea and the dry land, and I will shake all nations, and the desire of all nations shall come. The desire of all nations is going to come. And what's it going to do? And I will fill this house with glory, saith the Lord of hosts. So what made the temple glorious? It wasn't the gold or the silver. It was who dwelt there. All right. The Shekinah, as we call it. So God, he tells the people, he wants the people, he says, in short order, I'm going to shake up all of creation. How can God, who created the world, shake up all of creation? The answer is he can enter it. That is mind-blowing if you begin to think too much about it. Your favorite artist, think of who your favorite artist is. Van Gogh, he can paint some amazing scenes, but he can never be in the art. You can see attributes of his thinking, of what he wants to do, of who he is maybe in the art, but he's not in the art. But no, God, not only did he create the world, he says, you have no idea what's going to happen here. All of creation is going to be shook because the desire of nations is going to enter into this temple. Jesus Christ did not walk physically into Solomon's temple. He did walk into Zerubbabel's. So this temple has much more glory than Solomon's ever did. Jesus Christ went within its walls. There's a difference, right? So this temple will be filled with glory. There's no doubt that when the Persian Empire, right, they had subjugated the Greeks, and they were, the Greeks were actually this power that kept trying to rise and revolt against the Persians. And the Persians kept putting them down. And the whole world, right, it was thrown on its head when the Greek Empire somehow stopped the Persians from attacking them, and the Greeks took control. So in the short term, whenever we think about prophecies, a lot of times there's prophecies where there's something that happens in the short, near future, and then there's something that happens in the far distant future. So from some people, they'll look at this and they'll say, well, maybe the whole world was turned upside down and all the earth shaking and all that was when the Greeks finally overthrew the Persians, right? And that was all with Alexander the Great in the 300s BC, somewhere 360 or something like that. And of course, after that, you see the Roman Empire and you see things that have changed since then. But way more world shaking than that, like I said, is the coming of Jesus Christ. And again, he is the desire of nations, and he walked through the temple. As he was walking through the temple, people are like, look at this temple, isn't it fantastic, right? Look at all these stones and the architecture. What did Jesus say? But I say unto you that in this place is one greater than the temple. Who is he talking about? Himself, right? So does that mean now that because Jesus has entered that the shaking of nations is complete? Well, Hebrews chapter 12 actually quotes this verse. It says in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 26, it says, whose voice then shook the earth, but now he has promised, saying, remember, Hebrews was written after Jesus came and died and was resurrected. Yet once more I shake not the earth only, but also heaven. And this word, yet once more, signifieth the removing of those things that are shaken, as of things that are made, that those things which cannot be shaken may remain. So according to the book of Hebrews, all the things that were shaken will ultimately be removed and replaced, right? There is another world shaking event going to come. And guess what? He cracked reality when he came to this earth. He cracked reality when he left. And guess what? He's coming again. And it's going to turn this whole world on its head. And of course, we know he's going to destroy the coming world leader. So all of these people were so worried about how it looked to them. God reminds them in verse 8, who owns all the resources? He says, the silver is mine and the gold is mine, saith the Lord of hosts. The glory of this latter house will be greater than the former, saith the Lord of hosts. And in this place will I give peace, saith the Lord of hosts. So the new temple had no comparison to that former temple, the one that was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. But God said that this temple will out-glorify the previous, and that's all through Jesus Christ. And guess what? What's he going to give in that temple? Peace. What is our peace? Our peace is Jesus Christ. He says, don't worry about your lack of building materials. Don't worry about anything up there, because this temple is the one that Jesus will come through. Putting it into perspective. He's putting into perspective that all the silver is his, all the gold is his. Do you remember the original tabernacle? Whenever Moses gets the instructions on how to build the tabernacle and all the furniture, he gave him a model from the original one in heaven. He told him about the temple in heaven so that they modeled the one on earth after it, right? So that means that there's something that no matter what materials we have here on earth, it will never compare to what God has created in heaven. So stop trying to worry about your inadequacies, because God could never dwell in anything you built. It's a model to show what he does dwell in, but it's not that you built it good enough for him, right? Solomon, in all of his riches and all of his intricacy and all of his knowledge, smartest man on the planet ever, minus Jesus, smartest man to ever walk the earth, according to the Bible, most wisdom, could not build something suitable for God, right? What does that tell you about your house? Do you know what God calls you? The temple of God. So how much cleaning are you going to do? How much construction can you do to make yourself worthy of God dwelling in you? Could Solomon and all his riches and glory do it? He could never make anything that could contain Jesus Christ, right? God had to form the true temple. God is the one who purifies and makes you righteous. You can never get there on your own. He has to create you. You have to be a new creature in Christ. You need a temple from above, not created by man, but rather created by God. So a lot of people will say, well, I can work and make God pleased. Works will never, ever, ever make you adequate for God. Only once you've been made new can you truly serve the purpose that the temple was meant to serve, to speak to God through the world, to bring God to earth. Every person who has ever been saved, who has admitted their failures, to be saved, you have to admit, I am nothing. I deserve hell. I deserve judgment. Christ has forgiven me. The minute you say, I am saved because if your answer is anything besides accepted Jesus Christ, I'm sorry, you're still trying to do it yourself. You're doing what Solomon did, doing the best you can. And it may look good on the outside, but it doesn't actually bring the glory, does not have Jesus dwell in it. Solomon's temple looked great from a human perspective, but never could contain Jesus, right? So, by the way, this temple, Jesus didn't just walk through it. He actually stood on the highest peak of it. Does anybody remember when that happened? During his temptation. The devil took him there, right?
So you're talking Herod.
I'm talking, so Herod is the renovation of Zerubbabel's temple. So technically, I still call it Zerubbabel's, but some people call it Herod's temple.
Quick question on that, I can't remember. We know that it was such a lesser edifice. So do you think Herod demolished it and rebuilt or built upon it, seeing how Herod's temple was even more grand in scale than Solomon's? So what do you think?
So I think he added on to Zerubbabel's temple
Yeah.
because God makes it clear that it's Zerubbabel's temple that will contain the Messiah. So again, I call it a renovation. I don't think he leveled it and rebuilt it. I think he literally renovated it. And I think it may have been size-wise great, but certainly not more intricate and more valuable than Solomon's temple.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, people came from around the world
Right.
to see the spectacle,
It was
right?
scale.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
So then you get to verse 10. He says, now this is an interesting question. It says, in the 4th and 20th day of the 9th month, in the 2nd year of Darius, came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet, saying, thus saith the Lord of hosts, ask now the priests concerning the law, saying, if one bear holy flesh, so you're going to carry this meat in your skirt of the garment, and his skirt touches the bread or the pottage or the wine or oil or any meat, shall it be holy? So the question is, if I have meat that is consecrated to be used for God, and it bumps into any other food that's not consecrated, is it still holy? And they say, no, it has to be kept separate from the unholy. Then said Haggai, if one that is unclean by a dead body touch any of those things that are holy, shall it be unclean? And the priest answered and said, it shall be unclean. So if I'm not purified or anything I touch is not purified, if I go and do something, my work is unpurified because you have to be clean to enter the temple. Okay. Then answered Haggai and said, so is this people, and so is this nation before me, saith the Lord. So is everyone the work of their hands, and that which they offer there is unclean. So this is 2 months later, the day before Hanukkah would be celebrated, which is interesting, at the dedication of the temple. God asked the priest through Haggai, he says, you know, when an unclean thing touches a clean thing, it becomes unclean. True? They say true, right? So that means, what is that telling you? What's the purpose of that statement? It means that holiness is not contagious. When something holy is present, it doesn't make other things holy. But when something unholy is present, it makes everything else unholy. So think about it. If I have 2 cups of bottles of water, one is filled with muddy water, one is filled with clean water. I can take the muddy water and pour it into the clean and make it muddy, but I cannot take the clean water and pour it into the muddy and clean it up. It doesn't work that way, right? So God is saying the problem you guys have with seeing the inadequacies of your temple here is because you are unholy. Your hearts are not clean. No matter what you do, there's nothing you're going to do, and the house you build is going to be unholy. The best of your works looks like filthy rags. Your works are never going to get you there. There is only one time in the Bible that I'm aware of where somebody goes into the temple and is very upset because they are unholy. And they say, oh gosh, I am a man of unclean lips. You know, I'm unholy. How can I possibly be in here? So then an angel takes a coal from the altar and touches it to their lips and says, now your lips are clean. You have become holy, even though you were unholy, where the reverse happened. And of course, that's symbolic of what? That's symbolic of Jesus Christ. It is the only thing, us, no matter how good we are, something unholy contaminates us all. Bad apple spoils the whole bunch, we say. But Jesus Christ comes in and he has the complete reverse effect. His holiness is contagious. When he comes into your heart, you become holy. You become worthwhile. All of our works are as filthy rags. But the minute we become saved, our works matter. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. These people were feeling it. But he's telling them, the problem is you. Something needs to make you holy. So what does he say in verse 15? He says, now I pray you, consider from this day upward, from before a stone was laid upon a stone in the temple of the Lord, Since those days were when one came to a heap of 20 measures, there were but 10. And when one came to the press fat to draw out 50 vessels out of the press, there were but 20. I smote you with blasting and with mildew and with all the hail in all the labors of your hands, yet you turn not to me, saith the Lord. Consider now from this day and upward, from the 24th day out of the 9th month, even from the day of the foundation of the Lord's temple was laid, consider it. Is the seed yet in the barn? Yea, as yet the vine and the fig tree and the pomegranate and the olive tree hath not brought forth? From this day will I bless you. So the people, they were busy tending the temple. They were trying to serve God, do the temple. And God reminds them, don't you forget, don't you see that you are inadequate? But not only are you inadequate, before you started this work, you would go to try and harvest your grain. You would think, oh, good, I'm going to get 20 bales of hay, and you only had 10. You would think, oh, great, I'm going to get plenty of grapes to make wine, and you don't get enough to make half as much. He's saying, don't you see all the problems you had? But that was before a single block was laid for this temple. But ever since you came and you started to work for me, he's like, the seeds that are in the barn, the seeds that you never planted, I'm going to make those trees grow. Do you know how many Christians say, you know, I've been praying, but I just don't see how God can do it? Have you ever heard that statement? I just don't know how he could help me. There's nothing that anyone can do. But God says, listen, seek ye first the kingdom of God. He can make something from nothing. Matter of fact, he is the only being that is capable of that. Everyone else can turn one thing into another. He makes it from nothing. He says, do not give up hope just because you can't see how he can help you. It's not hopeless for God. Nothing is hopeless. Even when he tells you your son is going to die, I want you to kill him. When you trust in God, God does amazing things. We can trust in God, right? So as long as they remain obedient, watch and see the blessings that he will pour out, right? But remember, just keep in mind, our focus, if we had our eyes, right, set on the prize, we wouldn't be so foolish to stare down at the ground. That is what we do when we look at this world. When we measure God's blessings, we look at this world. Do I have enough money? Is everybody healthy? Are all my illnesses gone? Wait a minute, what? No, we are citizens. We're looking for the coming kingdom. That's the prize, right? Going to the kingdom. So don't be shocked whenever things don't go, even when you're in God's will, the way you want, when your barns aren't full, when your bank account's not doing great. That's not the point. How's your account in heaven? How are things going with the Lord? That's what matters. God will extremely bless you, but we are spiritually minded people. Don't listen, and I'm not saying God can't bless you financially, but don't listen to these prosperity preachers who are out there telling you, oh, send in $5, it'll be 500. Nonsense. Get out there, serve God, and invest in the bank of heaven. In less than a month, everything turned around for these people, by the way. Don't think, oh, well, I've been like this for a month. God, in 21 days, 31 days, turned these people's lives completely around. God can do everything for us if we trust in him. Verses 20 through 23, and we'll finish up here, says, and again, the word of the Lord came unto Haggai in the 24th day of the month, saying, speak to Zerubbabel, governor of Judah, saying, I will shake the heavens and the earth, and I will overthrow the throne of kingdoms. Notice that word, by the way, throne of kingdoms. And I will destroy the strength of the kingdoms of the heathen. And I will overthrow the chariots and those that ride in them. And the horses and their riders shall come down, every one by the sword of his brother. In that day, saith the Lord of hosts, what will I take thee, O Zerubbabel, my servant, the son of Shealtiel, saith the Lord, and will make thee as a signet or a sign. For I have chosen thee, saith the Lord of hosts. So this is the same day as the previous prophecy. God sends a message directly to Zerubbabel, right? He says, I am going to overthrow, I'm going to shake the earth, and I'm going to overthrow the throne of kingdoms, singular throne of all kingdoms. So all kingdoms have to be under one throne. When does that happen? During the tribulation. Under who? the Antichrist, right? So that kingdom is going to be thrown. He's going to overthrow the Antichrist, and he's going to take charge of the world. So all the armies of the heathen, he actually describes it here. He says, I'm going to take all their armies. I will overthrow their chariots, those that ride in them, the horses, the riders, everyone by the sword of his brother. And that's what we read about in the time of Armageddon, where God comes and defeats all of his enemies. All their weapons will be wiped out. So what is a signet, by the way? If I have a signet, that means it's a sign or some kind of symbol that I use to seal a document, right? If I want to authenticate this document's for me, it might say Garib on the seal or something along those lines. So Zerubbabel was to be the seal. So Zerubbabel had a bad lineage, right? Even Jeconiah, we talked about earlier, bad guy, but he was still in the line of kings. And he says, you know what? You are a righteous person. You are still chosen despite being under the blood curse of Jeconiah. So his line through adoption will be carried over. The line of David will be carried over, and he will become the great, great, great grandpa of Joseph, as we talked about earlier. So about 4 years after all of this, they'd completed the temple. And even though they were unimpressed, by the time Herod renovated it, everyone was quite impressed with it, right? Whenever Jesus walked, we talked about it before, everybody was like, wow, look at all these things. Look how fancy and nice they are. Jesus said, no, it served its purpose. I've come through here, one greater than the temple's here, and every temple thing you see here, every stone's going to come off the other, right? So again, God has much, much bigger plans than what you think should be done. Instead, we need to back out and we need to say, God, what is your will and how can I serve you tomorrow, right? Israel, ever since Nebuchadnezzar had come in and conquered Jerusalem and put them into captivity, began a time called the times of the Gentiles, right? But there is a time, and I believe coming sooner than you might think, where the times of the Gentiles wraps up, culminates with one king that shows up and then gets annihilated by the true king. And the most important thing is, are you living to please him today? That wraps up the book of Haggai.